If Maryland beats Washington, they'll be a top 25 team.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you guys for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. If Maryland football beats Washington this weekend, I think the Terps are officially a top 25 team in the country. We've come a long way since the start of the year and how we are viewed right now and how Maryland football is looked at. I think before this season, I never really thought of us as close to being a top 25 team. I didn't think we were that in terms of our talent. I thought we were way too young. I thought we had guys in spots that had just never played and experienced. I just didn't think we were a top 25 team in the country. I think in the past years, I thought we've had the talent to be a top 25 team, but we haven't really gotten to put it all together. I remember not last year, but 2 years ago, we did get ranked in the top 25, but after that, things went slowly downhill for Maryland football after we got ranked in the 25. I remember we were looking like right outside, or we were right outside the top 25. It was like we were 26 in the country or something after we had a couple big wins, and it just went downhill after that. So I'm not too caught up on the top 25 as long as we're winning games, but I do want to talk about this because I do think if Maryland beats Washington on Saturday at 3:30, I think Maryland is a top 25 team and going to be considered one of the better teams in the Big Ten. I don't know if you guys have realized, but people are starting to kind of circle this game for this weekend. Like I saw Big Ten Huddle, which is like a Twitter account that talks about the Big Ten. They had this game circled at 3:30. It's one of the better Big Ten matchups that we have this weekend. People are starting to put some respect on to Maryland people. People are starting to respect Maryland football overall, which I think is really cool and is really awesome. And if you look right now, we're just barely outside of the top 25 right now. It is kind of a little bit of a slower week in college football, like not as many big time games as we had last week. So that's part of the reason why. But people think this Maryland-Washington game is a huge kind of indicator on how the year is going to go for the middle-ish part of the Big Ten. And when I say the middle-ish part of the Big Ten, I usually think about teams like Nebraska this year, or Washington is another example of this. And then I think of a team like Illinois right now as an upper kind of middle of the pack Big Ten team. I think of some of those as like the middle-ish Big Ten teams that are really good football teams, but they're not quite college football playoff types of schools. And so that's kind of how I see the middle-ish of the Big Ten. And maybe some people would argue that Illinois is a little bit above that. I think they're a middle-ish Big Ten team right now, but teams especially like Nebraska, I think is a really good example of it. But if you look at the top 25 currently, the last Big Ten team in it is 22 Illinois. So if Maryland beats this game against Washington, I think there's no question about it. I think we're a top 25 team. I think we jump some of the teams that are currently on the outside looking in terms of teams like South Florida, Utah, Mississippi State, Memphis. Even though they're receiving more votes than us, I think that the main reason why the voters are kind of concerned, the voters are kind of taken back by Maryland football, and they haven't put us in there yet, is because we just haven't really played anyone or had the opportunity to play the level of games that we need to in order to compete, in order to prove that we're a top 25 team. But I think this game against Washington's a perfect example of a Washington team that just got beat by Ohio State. But a lot of people consider this Ohio State or this Washington team to be kind of like a borderline top 25 team. I think a lot of people kind of consider them to be right there on the outside looking in terms of that ranking and have the opportunity to get right back in there, even though they just lost to Ohio State. So even though they might not be receiving votes right now, I know that people will consider them right now a bottomish top 25, top 30 team in the country. And so I think winning a game like this puts us in the top 25. And like I said, I don't want to get too caught up on the ranking, but there is something to be said for a Maryland football team to be ranked in the top 25. Like I said, Illinois currently is at 22. These are the Big Ten teams that are ranked, and they're all pretty elite. Illinois at 22, Michigan at 20, and then you scroll down for a little bit, and you get teams like Indiana at 8. You get Penn State at 7 after they just lost. And then you get Oregon at 2 and Ohio State at 1. So there's plenty of really good Big Ten teams that are ranked. And so I look at the Maryland team, and I'm like, if Maryland can just figure out a way to get into the top 25, I think it's a big deal for the Terps. Because under Mike Locksley, that hasn't been something that we've consistently been able to do. We've entered it a couple different times. But to me, that's kind of the goal of where this program wants to be. I think we want to be like a borderline top 25 team every single year. I'm not saying a top 10 team. I think like a borderline top 30, top 25 team in college football where we're either ranked or always sniffing around right around that 25, 24, 23 mark, which I think is important for Maryland football to be able to do. I think that's kind of where the potential of this program lies. I don't think we're a top 10 team. And I think this opportunity against Washington gives us a perfect chance to solidify ourselves and to get ourselves right back into the top 25 and somewhere that we didn't think we could be. And to be honest, we're ahead of schedule with this team. We're ahead of schedule where this team is ranked. And so I do think there is some benefit for Maryland football. And I do think that the Terps are in a pretty good spot to make their jump here and to play at a pretty high level for Maryland football. So I do think we're in the jump. I think we're in ahead of schedule. And what I mean by that is this team's young everywhere. And so when you're led by a freshman quarterback in your top 25 team, I think a lot of people look at Maryland as in a really attractive spot to be at in terms of recruits, in terms of the transfer portal, where next year, who knows? The sky may be the limit for Maryland football. But obviously, we're just focused on this year, trying to crack the top 25. But I do think it's really really cool for Maryland football. And I do think if we beat Washington, I think the voters will put us in that. Let's talk about the QB battle this weekend. Malik Washington versus Damon Williams at Washington. That's a little bit of a tongue twister, Malik Washington, and then you have the actual Washington Huskies, but not to be confused. We'll talk about that next. How do I see it? Why this is a huge battle in this game. We'll talk about that next. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives, and if you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, and you can link all your accounts in minutes and see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. You can identify that you aren't saving as much as you thought, and Monarch helps you notice on inefficient investments allocation and discover forgotten 401ks from past jobs. Maximizing investments, increasing your savings rate, easily reviewing finance with your partner and or financial advisors keeps a clear view of your financial health week to week and long term. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS top safety picks plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the detail. And Mazda brings the same attention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheels drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. And like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. So I think there's a huge QB battle this weekend that Maryland, if they're going to want to win, has to capitalize on this. I think Malik Washington and Damon Williams that's tough. Malik Washington, Damon Williams for Washington just sounds a little bit wonky, sounds a little bit weird, obviously, with the last name Washington. But back to my point, I think both guys are arguably the best players on both teams. Like I think you would say 100% confidence that they're the most important player on both teams. And I think a lot of people would say that they're also the best two players on their team. And I think Damon Williams is a really toolsy, really impressive quarterback for Washington. I think he's a little bit different than Malik Washington. I don't think he's necessarily as purely talented, but he does a lot of things at a high level that allows you to win games in the Big Ten. And so I think whoever wins this quarterback battle, I think is probably going to end up winning this game. I think that's what it comes down to, because I think it's two guys that are both really elite, both guys that can play at a really high level. Obviously, Malik Washington is a freshman, and Damon Williams is now a sophomore, but so two guys that are still relatively on the younger side of things, especially Malik Washington. But when you compare their two seasons so far, they're pretty, I don't want to say they're pretty similar, but I think similar types of numbers. Damon Williams Jr., 951 yards so far this year, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Malik Washington, 1,038 yards, 8 touchdowns, 1 interceptions. Both guys aren't turning over the ball a lot. And so I think that's going to be a big part of this game, because we've seen Maryland football over the first couple of weeks, and we saw this 2 years ago as well. They're turning over people at such a high clip. And the only Big Ten team we played so far right now is Wisconsin. But Wisconsin threw a pick against us. Their quarterback didn't feel good in the pocket, threw it up to us. I think we're doing a really good job of creating turnovers. And so something's probably going to have to give, whether it's Damon Williams turning over the ball for Maryland football, because he hasn't turned over the ball very much, or Maryland's defense doesn't really create much opportunity in that sense. But we see both guys that don't really turn over the ball very much at all. And we're seeing Damon Williams complete a really high clip of throws as well, 75% of his throws, while Malik Washington only at 62%. But we've seen Malik Washington make bigger throws down the field so far this year. So I think both guys are pretty efficient. I think a lot of what concerns me about Damon Williams in places where Maryland football is going to have to be tight to be able to win this game that I haven't seen Malik Washington do very much of, which I do think Washington Huskies, the Huskies, I'll try and say, had the advantage over Maryland football in, is that Damon Williams can rush all over the place. And Malik Washington, we know, can run for sure, like 100% can run. That's maybe arguably the hardest part of Damon Williams' game, that the hardest part to stop is his rushing ability. Colorado State, 13 carries, 68 yards. Against UCD, where they won 70-10, 8 carries, 64 yards. Against Washington State, 13 carries, 88 yards. He's just rushing all over the place, and he's doing it at a pretty high level. And you saw against Ohio State where he had 13 carries for negative 28 yards. And obviously they include the sack yardage in that. But I do think that's something to look at. He also has 2 rushing touchdowns on the year, so it's part of his red zone threat. And so I think that's going to be the hardest part about him to stop. I think in terms of pure natural throwers of the football, I think Malik Washington's a little bit better. I don't want to slight Malik or Williams Jr. at all, because he's really good he's a really good thrower of the football too. It's not like he doesn't do that well. I just think when we look at the film, when we've seen of Malik Washington, I think Malik Washington creates a little bit more plays down the field. And so I think that's going to be a big part of this. It's going to be like, who creates a bigger plays, Malik Washington's arm or Williams Jr.'s leg? And I think that's going to be a key battle for this game. And I do think these are 2 of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. And so I'm excited to see these 2 duel it out, these 2 young kids duel it out, because I do think whoever has a better game, I think it's somewhat similar rosters. I think some people I think a lot of people would consider Washington Huskies a little bit better of a roster, but I think they're somewhat similar, Maryland being home, that whoever's the better quarterback, I think is probably going to end up winning the game. So we'll see exactly what happens, but I am excited to watch both quarterbacks play. I haven't watched a ton of Washington Huskies, haven't watched a ton of Damon Williams, so I'm definitely interested to see him play. Maryland basketball loses a player for the entire season. Let's talk about it, what Maryland basketball needs to do about it, what it means for Maryland basketball. We'll talk about that next. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, you put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays, you can do player props, and you can even follow the lines during the games, and you can live bet if you guys want to. Makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you guys waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. This episode is brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that make the neighborhood the neighborhood. These are places that become an extension of home. Whether it's a sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, the spot with the best wings in town for game day, or that beloved local chain that's been rooted in your community for years. These businesses are what bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. There's different spots in my neighborhood that's been the heart of the community for years. It's the kind of place where you walk in and everyone knows your names. Sports are something that brings neighborhoods together, and whether it's gathering for game day rituals, celebrating with best wings in town, or just being part of the fan base that calls the place home. When you show up as a community, it can mean a big business for local business owners. Money spent on neighborhood stays in the neighborhood. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, support your neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. So Maryland basketball loses Rakease Passmore for the year, which is really kind of sad for Maryland basketball, because I was honestly looking forward to this kid playing. And Maryland basketball is in a really weird spot. You just don't know right now who's going to play. There's so many different players on this team, but Rakease Passmore was one of the guys that I thought had a real opportunity to be a guy that made a huge jump this year for Maryland football or basketball. I'm so focused on football. But last year, as a freshman at Kansas, he played in 23 games. So if you're playing as a freshman at Kansas, you're probably doing something right. And yeah, he wasn't a guy that played a ton of minutes or a guy that was making a huge impact, but he was a player that we were really excited about having this year from Kansas and fitting onto the team because he was a top 50 recruit, really high-end recruit. And so we knew he had a lot of tools. We knew he had an athleticism. We thought he could make a jump. And so I do think it's kind of like, dang, we thought this kid could be something and turn into something. And he got a full year at Kansas under Bill Self. That definitely is pretty big for Maryland football or basketball. If you play a full season for Bill Self, that's big in college basketball. That's one of the better coaches in college basketball. So he's a guy that it's not like he came from like a small program after not doing much. He was going against some of the better players every single day, day in and day out at Kansas and learning from one of the better coaches. So you knew he was going to come in ready to play for Maryland basketball. And Maryland basketball, like I said, it's kind of an interesting spot because I had no idea who's going to play this year. Outside of like 3 guys, I'd say, maybe 4. The depth is crazy, but there's not a lot of guys that were like, oh, yeah, we know they're going to play, or, oh, yeah, like that's a dude for us. I'd say there's probably about 4 guys, maybe, that were like 3 or 4 guys that I'm like, yeah, they're going to play a lot. Like we know Pharrell Payne's probably arguably our best player. We know Miles Rice probably is going to play a lot. I think we assume that Isaiah Watts is going to play, and then Darius Adams is a 5-star recruit. Like we kind of assume Solomon Washington, but then after that, it's like, is David Coit going to be a big part of the team? Is Colin Metcalf going to play? Is the freshman Alex Austin? How about George Turkson? Is he going to be playing? Andre Mills? Like there's a lot of kind of question marks from Maryland basketball about the roster. And so for me, I thought Rakease was going to have every opportunity to be part of the rotation, to play a ton. He was kind of considered like a 2-3-ish type of guy. I think he's about 6'5". He was a little bit raw too. And so I think his athleticism and what his potential as a player was really high. But when you tear your Achilles, you're obviously not going to be able to play basketball for an entire year. He's missing a lot of key time, and you got to feel for the kid because I think he had a chance this year to really develop into something that was really good for Maryland basketball. So one guy less on this team that is going to be able to play. So I do think we get a little bit weaker in terms of our depth. I still think there's plenty of guys that you look at for Maryland basketball that can play at a high level. But I do think there's some spots that need to be cleaned out a little bit that we still need to figure out on some different things. But it's definitely a big injury. You do 100% feel for the kid. You transfer somewhere, you're excited, you have an opportunity to make an impact, to be able to play, and now it's like, dang. So I feel for Rakease. I kind of feel for what he's going through, and we'll see exactly what ends up happening with him. I do hope that he returns full strength. He's an athletic kid. I'm sure he's a great kid. Don't know too much about him yet, but I'm sure that it'll all be all right for Rakease, and he'll end up coming back from this, and hopefully still with Maryland basketball. You never know with today's game and the transfer portal and everything, but hopefully it's still with Maryland basketball. That's all we have for today. Thank you guys for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you guys for listening to Locked On Terps.